We've got one more awesome speaker. And this time we're going to take a different tack. As you saw, we talked about the ground, the data, the numbers. We talked about the government aspect of it. We gave you an account of how these things affect our cities, municipalities, and counties. And now we're going to talk about something that's kind of often left out when we get in these type of forums, is how it affects our businesses. How do our business look at these institutional investors? Because they have to take a kind of different slant because of where they're standing at. So I want to introduce you to a very fine gentleman, friend of mine, by the name of DeVon Hudson. DeVon is the president and CEO of DeVon Hudson. Let me say that E Hudson Insurance Agency, an affiliate with State Farm Insurance, a principal owner of the Hudson Holding Company, a real estate construction and management firm. Mr. Hudson's State Farm Insurance Agency opened in 1984 and is a top performing independent agency with the gross revenues of more than $10 million annually. His agency emphasizes financial service aspects of insurance and educates his clients about building generational wealth. There goes that conversation again about generational wealth, having that thing that you can pass on. And this is where we're having these conversations, because some of these things are getting in the way of what we're trying to do for growing our community and creating long-lasting wealth. Taking on the complexities of the insurance and commercial real estate industry, DeVon applies the same simple business principles to both deliver a superior product and provide exceptional customer service. Mr. Hudson's accomplishments as an entrepreneur are the result of strong work ethic, perseverance, and an abiding faith in divine guidance. Mr. Hudson, wonderful top of the evening to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I certainly appreciate that. And thank you for the opportunity to share this evening with these other distinguished panelists. I'm just a businessman who lives in South DeKalb and is a concerned citizen. You have to always pay attention to what's going on around you. This whole institutional investors who have come in, I tell all of my friends and all those who will listen, this has been preset and pre-planned. They know exactly where they're going. And I'm going to just kind of dive into some of my thoughts, and certainly in the Q&A, we can talk about it a little bit more. But one of the things I always say is, if you were here in 2008, when we had the mortgage crisis, if you looked into the background of how that occurred, what they sold to the American public is that all these people got low interest loans who could not qualify for the loans. And then they defaulted on the loans, which is what happened. But I always beg the question is, how did they get the loans? Who approved them? So when you do a deep dive into this thing, what you'll find is these same institutional investors were there in 2008. Actually, it started in 2006. We had a high amount of houses being sold. The market was flourishing. And those of you who dabble in real estate know that the real estate market typically goes in about an 8 or 10 year cycle. It goes through a high and low. And what it does, it kind of keeps a balance throughout the system. What we have happening now, I do believe, is this: we're not going to have a real estate crash like we typically have, because the demand is very high and the supply is very low. But we are going to continue to have this availability and affordability problem, which Mayor Motley Broom talked about and which Mike talked about. That's not going to go away. But I'd like you to take a little bit of a walk with me and go back to 2008, and let's talk about what happened there. And I'm here to tell you this evening that I think the same thing is happening again. So back in 2008, starting in 2006, availability of funds to buy houses was there for everyone. These institutions went in, they made money available to the lending agencies. They sold all these mortgages, but the end game really was not about getting people into houses. The end game was about getting people into mortgages. And what they wanted to do was get all these mortgages together. And at some point, what they do with these hedge funds is they package all these mortgages together. Now, the beauty of big money is this, that everybody figured out a way that everybody can win and nobody loses. So in 2008, what happened is the institutional investors packaged all these mortgages together, many of them that they already knew were going to default. They had already gone over and gotten this paper, what we call papers when they bundle mortgages together. They had gotten this paper rated to be A paper. And in the financial world, A paper is something where you're not going to have any defaults. But the reality is they knew that in those packages, there were going to be defaults. But once that package is rated as an A rating, they take it and sell it to an investor. And when they sell it to the investor, what the investor is looking for is just purely cash flow. He's looking for the revenue that's going to come in off of these mortgages over a period of time. Now, the hedge fund has made its money. You know, they have discounted those loans, sold them off to an investor. The investor now is looking at, okay, I'm going to have this revenue coming in for X number of years. Well, what happened in reality in '08 was this. At the same time that the hedge funds were selling off these loans to investors, they were going to insurance companies and buying insurance that those loans or those packages were going to go bad. So there is a market out there for everything. You know, you can buy insurance to insure anything, whether it's your legs or whether it's you can go and bet on sports games or whatever. There's a market out there for everything. Hedge funds bought insurance to say that, hey, these loans that we've sold these guys, although we've told them that they're good, I think they might fall apart, knowing all well that they're going to fall apart. So what do we have? We fast forward to '08. Now all of a sudden, all these investors, the investors that have come in who bought these packages, and a lot of them were foreign investors. Now there's this big default rate. And what we're starting to see is these packages that were bundled as Class A paper that there should not be defaults, they all started falling apart. That's when you start to see the Morgan Stanleys of the world start to have problems because they were all part of that whole game plan. And I only ask you to walk with me in that regard because I kind of see the same thing happening now. You know, what we have is these institutional investors now have turned their market or turned their heads to residential homes. And the interesting thing is you look at the patterns. Mike showed a diagram earlier, that pattern, the bottom of Cobb County through Paulding, South Fulton County, top of Clayton County, South DeKalb, where the predominant number of these mortgages or houses have been bought by these institutional investors. I read something the other day that said 1 out of 7 houses right now is owned by some institutional investor that's tied to Wall Street. Of the top 6 companies that Mike mentioned in his opening earlier, Tricon Capital, they got their funding from Blackstone. Invitational Homes is wholly owned by Blackstone. So for those of you who follow the market, Blackstone is just a huge investment firm. And all they do is look for opportunities. First Key Homes is owned by Morgan Stanley, another hedge fund. American Homes for Rent is owned by 10 different hedge funds that came together and put a pool of money together for American Homes for Rent to be able to buy houses. So why do I tell you all this? So here's what I see happening. So now you buy all these houses in these communities that have probably are going to have the biggest eviction rate, which is what we talked about. I think Charlotte talked about the number of evictions in some of these counties that we have. So why would a company go in, buy all these houses, and only want to rent them out, knowing that the possibility they're going to turn around and evict people? Nobody's coming out here just to own the land and not have a cash flow off of it. I'm here to tell you tonight that what I think is happening is this. At the end of the day, these companies that have gone in and bought these homes in our communities, what they're going to do is they're going to package all this stuff together and sell it to investors. Now, the interesting thing about that world is this. You know, you like to say, okay, I got 100 homes and it's drawing maybe $100,000 a month in rent, but you know there's only drawing $50,000 in rent. So how do we get around that? Well, the advent of CPAs and accountants is never short of amazing. Trust me, on the backside of all of this, at the end of the day, what I believe these companies will do, they're going to bundle all these mortgages, all these houses together. They're going to sell them off. They're going to do the same thing they did with the mortgages back in '08. Now, how does that look in our communities? Well, one of 2 things is going to happen. When they sell these houses off to whoever the end investor is, and that end investor realizes that he doesn't have the cash flow that was purported that he's going to have, he's going to do one of 2 things. He's either going to dump all these houses back on the market at a deflated price and destroy all these neighborhoods that are already established and already have market values, or they're going to dump all these houses back on the market. And if they want to, what they're doing now is there will be same amount of supply and demand issues. And what they'll do is artificially keep the prices high. And when they do that, it goes to what Ms. Davis was talking about, this affordability and availability process, and the middle income people not being able to afford housing. I often say during the '08 crisis that in Black America, that we probably wiped out 20 years of affluence and equity just in that process in '08. And what I see happening now is kind of the same thing. Here we are in 2022. We're in a situation where rents are sky high. You can't buy a house. People can't afford to buy houses. And if they happen to dump these houses back on the market, that person whose house has been stable and who's been getting all these calls about getting some inflated price, he's going to be sitting on a piece of property that's going to be devalued. Now, the wonderful thing about real estate, typically it always comes back. It comes back in time. But how many times does Black America or any community can they stand devaluation and reevaluation? If you went through this in '08 and you're standing strong right now, you know, that is a blessing within itself. What I think is going to happen, not this year, but maybe in 2023, because all the economists are saying that we're not going to have a market crash, but this whole availability and affordability thing is going to be tremendously serious. Now, how do you stop all that? I'm not really sure, and I don't have all the answers, just like Mayor Motley Bloom talked about, but I will say the actions of our lawmakers, what they've done in College Park in terms of not voting for these for rent properties, I think that is a start. I think that conversation with the state lawmakers about giving us the opportunity to have a voice in our own communities, I think that is a start. Me personally, I am a pro advocate for cityhood right here in South DeKalb. I do believe that we are very, very vulnerable to this whole market's ups and downs because we don't have anyone to speak for us. So at the end of the day, what we have to realize is this: we are asking corporations to have a moral compass, and it doesn't work that way. Corporations don't have a moral compass. They have the objective of a profit motive. They have to take care of their shareholders. And at the end of the day, you have to realize this is still America. America was built on capitalism. And unfortunately, we're at a point now where people are going to take capitalism over any moral obligations or thoughts about communities. And the only way that we control that is that we have local control. We do the things that the cities are doing. We have to go down and make sure that we can maintain control. But I think overall, and I'll close on this, is this: at the end of the day, what happens in our community really depends upon us, we as the people. You know, hedge funds are going to come and do exactly what they're going to do, because that's what they do. It's kind of like when you know the nature of the snake, you know it will bite you. So what I ask people to do is think about and understand what's going on just beyond that high price that they're offering you. So for many people, even though they're getting a great value for their home now, they can't afford to go anyplace else. So that's stopping them from selling. But the other side of it, we need the administration, we need the lawmakers on the other side to give us some strength. As they talked about earlier, the lobby group is strong. And all of us know as constituents that money tends to move the needle in a lot of ways. But I am a firm believer that we as a people can move the needle. I think we can move the needle by our voices being heard, being active in our political process. And not only that, having a conscience. Because anything about America, there's enough for everybody. And what you will find is that there is greed everywhere. You're not going to ever stop that. But what we can do is have a collective voice, be heard, and make a difference in the streets. Kevin, thank you for my opportunity to speak, and I'll be glad to hang around for any questions that anyone might have.